to speak about Hanukkah. How appropriate, right? So I'd like to address one basic question and to answer it through a few smaller questions which would sort of give us a little bit of a clarity, which would explain give an answer to the first question. The first question is, why are we celebrating Hanukkah? And I'm open to suggestions. Come on, help me out here, someone.
The oil lasted for 8 days.
The oil lasted for 8 days. We won victory. Maccabees won. Yeah. Anything else?
The oil was in the temple.
Right, they found the oil in the temple. We needed some sort of holiday in the middle of the year.
8 presents. Wow.
There you go. The first day of Hanukkah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me reiterate the question once again. All of these answers are absolutely correct, but I'd like to ask the following question. Why do we, today, in 2013, celebrate Hanukkah? You see the question? It's a bit different. You see, I have no question that there was a great miracle that took place 2,300 and some years ago. I have no question that there were several miracles that took place. My question is, what does it have to do with us? Now, you might look at me and say, well, Rabbi, come on, like, this is a Jewish gathering, and we're really sentimental. You know, like, we do Pesach, we do Sukkot, we do this, and everything is like Zecher L'Yetziat Mitzrayim, commemorating the Exodus from Egypt, commemorating Mount Sinai. All of those, like most of the things in Judaism, like many, not I wouldn't say most, but many things in Judaism are commemoration. Almost every single holiday. Say it again? Correct. Even the bracha that we say when we. Correct. Even the bracha for the candle lighting, right? We say, thank you Hashem for doing miracles to our forefathers. Bayamim hahem, as you're saying, in those days, at this time. So it took place, yeah?
But religious freedom.
Religious freedom is also a very, very important thing, correct. My question, so religious freedom is already bringing us into, well, that is something that is applicable today. It is very, very correct. So in terms of the miracles that we're celebrating, and we daven for them, we praise Him, like Al Hanisiv, Al Haniflaot, we light candles to commemorate the oil, we say for the miracles, for the victory in the war, etc. And all of these things seem to be, like very commemorative. Now in Judaism, as I said, we do commemorate things, but there's a slight difference. I'd like to show a little bit of a difference between those holidays versus what seemingly Hanukkah is. I had once a book. I can't remember the name of the book, but it was a non-Jewish book. It was written by a non-Jew, non-religious book. No religious affiliation, as far as I can tell whatsoever, to the book. It was discussing at one of its chapters. It was not really so much on topic, but on one of the chapters, it was discussing the war taking place in Israel between the Hashmonaim, the Maccabees, the Maccabees and the Greek, or the Assyrian army hired by the Greeks at the time. And he had a very, very interesting, very different take on the whole war. His whole approach was, that was really the opening statement of guerrilla warfare taking place worldwide, and how they won, opening the door to the concept of guerrilla warfare around the world, and then basically showing how, probably the Jews are to blame for every guerrilla war that took place since then. That wasn't so much said so explicitly, but I was like, wow, I've never seen someone take Hanukkah so out of context in just one chapter. I was blown away. On Pesach, we sit at the Seder, and we commemorate what took place in the Exodus of Egypt. But it's relevant to my children. And the reason for it is because I'm sitting there and I'm telling them that just as Hashem cared for His children, taking them out of Egypt, you guys should know that today, around this table, my children should also have the exact same comfort. 3,224 years ago, our forefathers stood at the foot of Mount Sinai and received Torah. On Shavuot, we celebrate once again that we too have Torah. But if Hanukkah sums itself up to a latke and a donut, and what really Hanukkah is all about. Does that make sense? Question starting right? Why are we celebrating Hanukkah? You say, how does it connect to us today? So I'd like to answer that through three questions. First of all, is a little bit of a deeper understanding of who we are as Jewish people in general. As in, who are the Jews, kind of thing. Introduce you to yourselves a little bit. Secondly, I'd like to recap several pieces, but not all, not in any way all, of the story of Hanukkah, just the story itself, the narrative of Hanukkah. Third, I'd like to discuss the miracles which took place in the story of Hanukkah. And I think if we cover these three parts, we'll have a whole new understanding as to how Hanukkah today is celebrated by us. Alright, here we go. So who are the Jews? I had once a teacher who once said, he sort of made a parallel, tried to draw a parallel between the Jewish people and, for lack of a better term, what magic dust, fairy dust. The Jews are the fairy dust of the universe. And like, I remember, I had the exact same reaction. I was like, seriously, fairy dust? You couldn't come up with anything more original than that? And afterwards, when he explained himself, I was blown away. It's actually true. So I mentioned it on Shabbat to a few of my friends. There was once a conversation taking place between King Louis XIV and Blaise Pascal. And the king turns over to Blaise Pascal, the French philosopher, and says to him, I would like you to prove to me the existence of the supernatural in the world. And Blaise Pascal, without hesitating for a moment, turns back to the king and he says, why the Jews, your majesty, the Jews. When you're looking for proof for the existence of the supernatural, for the existence of something miraculous, for the existence of something that shouldn't be there, yet is, Blaise Pascal chose the Jews as that example. What he's saying is, 1700s, for the Jews to still be around, is completely miraculous. And we've gone through quite a bit of an ordeal in the last 200 years. If you were alive today and you would still see the Jews around, he'd be blown away even all that much, right? So let's examine a little bit why did he choose the Jews why did he choose the Jews to be that example of the supernatural? And then we'll take it from there. So first of all, Hashem says to Avraham Avinu in the covenant between the parts in the book of Genesis, God says to Abraham that his children are going to have, he and his children are going to have an eternal covenant between God and the Jewish people forever and ever, basically saying, I'm in for the long run, and so are you. The Jewish people and God are interconnected for an eternal connection forever. How long do the Jews plan to be here? Forever. How long do they stick around? Forever. When are we over? There is no such thing. We're here forever. Okay? There is an eternal bond between God and the Jewish people. It's a promise that God gives Abraham as part of this package deal. But then you look at other verses in the Torah, and you're a little bit surprised on how we're expected to stick that, to be able to somehow manage that. So just using a few examples, one is, as part of that promise that God promises Abraham that the Jewish people are going to be an eternal nation, God also throws in there and says, oh, by the way, your children are going to be exiled. Now, Abraham doesn't like hearing that, and he actually asks God for a little bit of assurance, making sure that everything's going to stay on track as supposed to. But if you look throughout history, if you take a people and you remove them from their country, you remove them from their land, and you mix around their history. Now they have different people, different histories. You mix around their languages, different people, different languages. They're no longer called a nation. Like, it's very, very difficult in any way to define these people as a nation. Yet, It's a very simple, short flight from, not such a short flight, but still, flight from here to Tel Aviv. You come off the plane, and there isn't a single stereotype that you could really pin on the Jews that would actually stick. We're every color, we're every type, we're in every shape and form. The language is barely a connector between Jews. You have hundreds of thousands of Jews around the world today who do not speak Hebrew. They barely can make their way through a prayer book, if at all. Language is not a connection. History, well, like a Jew who comes from Eastern Europe, and a Jew who comes from South America, a Jew who comes from China, a Jew who comes from an Arab country, an African Jew, a European Jew. Where is there shared history? You go thousands of years back, you start tracing it. But the last 5, 7, 1,000 years, we've been all over the place. History doesn't connect us. Language, if you go to Israel, probably the one safe language you could get away with in Israel today is no longer Hebrew. It's most likely English. It's a phenomenon, right? Russian also. It's everywhere, right? It's unbelievable. It's amazing. I remember when I was a young boy growing up in Israel. It was after what they called in Israel Aliyah Shniya, the second Aliyah of the second wave of Russian Jewry making their way into Israel, late 80s, early 90s. And we used to have a course at my grandmother's dinner, my grandmother's house once a week. I think it was Tuesday nights. We used to come together, and we hired a teacher, a Russian teacher, who was teaching us a little bit of Russian phrases, a little bit of Russian words. I barely remember anything. At the end of the day, I'll be able to tell you, spokojnej noci and do svidaniya. That's as much as we're going to get from it. Anyone who wants more than that is not going to get it. But, yeah. Good night, good evening, and goodbye. Pajalistas.
That was a good teacher.
Was that?
That was a good teacher.
Yes, but why do I remember those two phrases? It's actually an interesting story. We couldn't feel we're trying as a community. We're trying to welcome Russian Jewry into our family, as Jews should, and we just the connection never worked. That the language barrier was so difficult, and one of my cousins one week shows up and she says, I figured it out. I figured it out. Last week, before the teacher left, she said something, and I've been repeating it every single morning to the janitor at our work, who's a Russian Jew, who I can't speak to, but every day I say that to him, and he smiles at me. I figured out how to build a connection between me and the other person. We're like, really? What did you say? She says, well, every morning when I see him, I say, spokojnej noci, which is good evening. No wonder the guy can smile, right?
No, it's actually, have a good night.
It's good night, good, even better. He just started his work day, and here we are wishing him good night. We got to put the smile at least. Anyhow, language once again is definitely not something that connects the Jewish people unanimously. So we don't have a language. We don't have, for 2,000 years, we don't have a piece of land. We don't have a history that connects us. How are we a nation? So God says to him, oh, you're going to be an eternal nation, yet you're going to be exiled. And to really make it special, you're not only going to be exiled once, you're not only going to be exiled twice, even not 3 times. 3 times is also not enough. There's going to be 4 different exiles for the Jewish people. In history, currently, to date, as far as I know, I've spoken to a few historians, and to date, there have been a number of nations that were exiled as a nation from their land. Very few of them went back to their land, but only one nation did it twice. Only one group in history has ever been kicked as a nation out of their land twice. That's us. Twice? We should be wiped out, we should be gone. But no, we're an eternal nation. Somehow exile is not going to affect us. Another thing, God says to Abraham also, Me'at mikol ha'amim, you're going to be few amongst the nations. 4,000 years ago, when the whole scene of Judaism is barely starting to even come about. I don't even have to go there. 3,000 years ago, I think. Approximately 3,000 years ago, a little bit before, like Mount Sinai. Let's go 3,500 years ago. Okay, the Jewish people are very few in number. Egypt time were thousands at the beginning. Eventually, we leave 3 million. But at the beginning, we're a few thousands. Okay, 4,000 years ago, on record, on history's record, there's 40,000 Chinese. Anyone quick in math, how many Jews there should be today if we went in their path of population?
Billions.
There are 1.8 billion Chinese. Oh, the funniest thing is, in the year 2008, I think, it was a census, they counted, I think they were at the time at 1.65 billion. But then there's an approximation because there is a margin of error. You know how much the margin of error is for China? The margin of error is 40 million. The Jewish people can fit almost 3 times into that number. We're few in number, by no question, right? We're very few. All throughout history, we're very few in number. How are we supposed to be an eternal nation, being hit with exile time and time again, and yet, and be few in number, but somehow manage to be the eternal? How is that supposed to work? Throw in another one. As part of the promise, God says to Abraham, don't worry, there's going to be a system in the universe which is going to make your kids really get into a lot of trouble all the time. It's called anti-Semitism. I don't think there's been a 10-year span ever in history, probably even less, that we don't have recorded anti-Semitism. I'm not talking about just taking place probably every day. I'm talking about a recorded time in history, ever since Mount Sinai, that we don't have recorded anti-Semitism taking place. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And for what? What are the Jews hated for? There isn't one thing in this world that we're hated because we're too rich, we're hated because we're too poor, we're hated because we're Democrats, we're hated because we're communists, we're hated because... anything you'll say, and the opposite, we're hated for it. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. How is this nation supposed to survive? How is this nation supposed to survive? And you know what? To make it a little bit more interesting, God throws in there a few extra curveballs. He says, those few people who the world hates, who's going to be exiled time and again, who somehow is supposed to survive, oh, they're going to be a light to the nation. They're going to be Orla Goyim. They're going to be a light. The whole world is going to be seeking after what they do. And please do try to challenge this. In the last 150 years, any major scientific break in any area, you'll find that Jews were not alone. I didn't say that, but were definitely an integral component of the like the front line in discoveries of every single discovery in the last 100 years, 150 years. It's amazing, amazing. The Jewish rush doesn't stop, and these people are still, like they throw a curveball at everybody's, at everybody else, and that is, we're going to have a special connection to a piece of land, a little small piece of land in the Middle East. We're going to have a special connection to it. Now, when I mean a special connection, I don't mean the little special connection that we have in our heart, which is very important. Don't misunderstand. If we're going to stay a nation, we're supposed to have a connection to the land. I'm talking a biological connection. I'm talking crops. I'm talking 1900 years of desolate desert in the Middle East, and then in 65 years, short 65 years, I don't mean to say this as a joke. You know the term selling ice to the Eskimos?
Yes.
What's the origin of mangoes?
Sorry?
Where is the origin of mangoes? Where do mangoes originate from? India. Didn't know that? Now you learned it. Mangoes originated, they're originally from India. There's also some from South America, but mainly from India. Did you know that we are the #1 exporter in the world of mangoes to India? Can someone please explain that? We're selling ice to the Eskimos. 65 years, and like the second outside of Silicon Valley. We're the number one inventor outside of Silicon Valley. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Amazing. When the Jewish people are in their homeland in Israel, we're unstoppable. It's amazing. It's amazing. And yes, connected to that is the promise that God also gives Avraham. There's going to be a connection, an eternal connection to the land, and we're going to return back from all of those exiles. That's the last part of the promise, the equation that God promises that we're going to return to our land. Normally makes no sense. A nation who's exiled, they're gone, they're never coming back. If they come, fine. But they're exiled second time, they're not coming back third time. It just doesn't happen. It's never happened. We do it. Nothing stops us. So he looks at me and he says, this teacher of mine looks at me and he says, Jews equals miracles. It's just a natural occurrence. By us, it's not even called miracles. Jews are like fairy dust. Sprinkle a little bit around, miracles pop out. It's just an amazing thing. It's just how it goes. Now let's go to Hanukkah. Hanukkah, there is a war going on in Israel. It's not really a war. At the beginning, it just starts as a very peaceful, relatively peaceful arrangement. The Assyrian army basically is now in control of. There is war going on between the northern Greek and southern Greeks, and eventually the northern Greeks win and they take over the Middle East, and they're trying to invade down to Egypt because that's where the Ptolemaic empire is situated. Anyhow, Israel gets caught in the crossfire. The Jews obviously get caught in the crossfire. And now we're under Greek rule. Now we're under the Northern Kingdom rule. We live like that for quite some time. And everything is going well. Eventually, the Assyrian army, which are basically the mercenaries for the Greeks, don't like the whole system that the Jews don't obey, don't accept Greek culture as part of their lifestyle. And they start persecuting the Jews, something we've seen many, many times before, and something that unfortunately we've seen many times after too. But let's understand exactly what's going on here. Greek culture is an amazing, amazing thing if you think about it. There is a collision between Judaism and Greek culture. But my question is, what's the problem? Isn't democracy a good thing? Aren't the arts and universities a great invention? Why do we call it a war between Torah and Greek culture? And if you would somehow explain the argument between them, why shouldn't I side with the Greek culture? It sounds like a very appealing thing. We practice it today. We're very thankful for it. So let's understand it. There is a fundamental difference between Greek culture, and I'm not talking specifically a single thing, so don't understand the culture. Greek culture versus Jewish culture has a fundamental difference, and that's really where Judaism collides with the Greek culture. It gives the following. We're going to use the United States for an example. I apologize to all Americans present. I'm allowed, I'm a Yankee. Here we go. In the United States of America, the law is designed and based on a Bill of Rights. I have the right to my property, and therefore, you're not allowed to walk onto my property without permission. Makes sense. That's how I'm going to keep my property secure, right? For me to keep my property secure, we have to prevent you from taking my property. How do we do it? We write in the law that I have the right to my property and to keep my property safe, and therefore, you, by law, are not allowed to infringe on my rights. How about in Torah? How does that work? In Torah, you're also not allowed to steal. But in Torah, it works the other way around. In Torah, the reason why you have your property safe is not because you have the right to your property. Rather because by it simply being yours, I am not allowed to steal it. The obligation is on me, not your rights. And because it's a little bit hard to understand, let me use an example. Let's use marriage as an example. I love using that example. Don't mean to offend anyone. Here we go. If a couple have a good, solid marriage going on, and everything is perfect, and everyone is happy, there is a system that they have to be working together in order for the marriage to actually work. Or else, let's see what happens. If the husband walks into the house and is looking at the life of a marriage as a form of a contract, like, I'm going to work and bring the money, you're going to cook and provide the food. Okay, you're going to make the meals. How sounds like a deal? Husband shows up and the food's not ready. What's his claim? Like, I have the right for it. Where is my food? The wife looks at him and says, well, I have the right to a clean kitchen and you didn't throw out the garbage. Here we go. War, right? We could go on 1,000 different examples, but I'm trying to simplify this, right? If we're looking at the point of view of like, what am I going to get out of the marriage? Then it's always going to be about an environment of taking. Whereas, if the whole idea is about what can I give into the marriage to make the system work, I'm a chayim, then it's fun to live in. Right? If it's about giving versus taking. Greek culture is designed in a very comfortable and very, very nice way, but it's designed around taking, about my rights, what can I get from it? And before you know it, I'm like, if someone is you know, like a civil right, and you know, like he's a right activist, you know, like you have to be very careful. If you step on his property, he's going to sue you. Like in Texas, they're going to shoot you. You got to be careful there, right? Why is that? The answer is because, well, I have certain rights, and I will get them. Whichever way it takes, I will get my rights. So it's right. You put that system into practice, it may work very well. But the people you're creating, the personalities you're developing, are people who are very, very selfish. One of the best court cases that I really, really like discussing is a case that took place in the United States of America, and I understand there were several others, but this person broke into a house in the middle of the night. And they left some of their children's toys on the floor. And while he was robbing them, while he was stealing their belongings, he tripped over one of the toys, fell, and broke his arm. And he yelled and cried because it hurt. The guy woke up, the house owner woke up, and he called the cops, and the guy was put into cuffs and taken to jail. And he was found convicted and was sentenced to jail, and he went to jail. But while in jail, he sued the house owner for leaving the toys on the floor that caused him to break his arm, and he won. He won the case. I'm like, you broke into my house, you stepped on my kids' toys, and then you sue me for that? It's like, hey, but it's my rights. I have the rights to safety. You left something unsafe on the floor and I tripped. So, next time bring a flashlight when you rob a house. And I go, what was he thinking? No, hey, if it's my rights, then that's how... Do you understand the idea? If you're building the society based on rights as opposed to how can we become better people who care about each other? Not about how can I abuse the system for my own use, but how can we collectively be better people to help each other? Two different systems. That was the collision between Judaism and Greek culture during the story of Hanukkah. In the Torah, we're told that the system we're supposed to follow is v'halachta bidrachav. You shall walk in his paths. A man is supposed to try to emulate God. And just as God has done all this good, you look around the world, he's created a perfect world for us. Similarly, we're supposed to try to create an environment where we're good to others. Just as God is good to us, we're good to others. That's the idea behind it. Now let's look at some of the miracles that actually took place at Hanukkah. Now that we understand that that's where Judaism is conflicting with Greek culture, let's look a little bit more at the details. So we have one miracle that we read Aleph Nisim every day in the prayers in the services and the blessing after grace after meal. We say, for the miracles that God has created us, and we thank God for all that, and we make a list of things that we say. One of the things is this great war that was actually taking place, and it was somewhat a guerrilla warfare. And it was done that way. But it was very, very few. At the highest records of history that we have 7,000 Jews in a single unit in army. Okay, so there were several fronts that we were fighting, but the largest front we ever were able to have as a group was 7,000 Jews. There were 250,000 Assyrian trained soldiers who were trying to fight against us. It makes no, we were battling at times 1 to 19. It just doesn't make any sense. Yet we victoriously won. Weak. We're talking about farmers. We're not talking about people who used to study for a living, or used to farm for a living. We're not talking about, as opposed to the Assyrian army, which was, the Greek army were the best trained in the world at the time. But the answer is really, as we mentioned before, the Jewish people are fairy dust, and when you sprinkle a little bit around, we have miracles happening everywhere, and we somehow win this war. But what you have to understand is that when Jews fight for that which is true, when Jews fight for Torah, miracles are everywhere. That's just a natural thing that happens. To the point that we don't even recognize them as miracles, and I'll explain. All these wars, yes, took place miraculously, we won. But if you read the texts, if you read the stories of how they took place, the Jews were playing all kinds of smart tactics. It was almost hidden to a certain extent in a mask of good coincidences. It wasn't blazing miracles every day, everywhere, outright miracles. Yes, the story was miraculous. To the point that at the end of the whole story, God says, I just want to remind you guys, by the way, this whole season was a major miracle. So here's a little bit of oil, and just look at it. Oil for 1 day, I'll make it burn for 8 days. As, the climax. Just understand, this whole story was a story of miracles. That was the build-up. But the wars seemed to be there were still wars. There were terrible battles. And the idea is, when the Jews unite as a group and are willing to sacrifice their lives, they're willing to put everything on the line for the truth of Torah, for the essence of what Torah stands for, and that is bettering ourselves and becoming really good people for each other as a collective community. If that's what we stand for, nothing can stop us. Miracles day and night everywhere that we turn. Those were the miracles of Hanukkah. The miracles of Hanukkah was not only what took place, it was also the dedication that the Jewish people showed. And once they showed dedication, it looked like nature. It's normal. When we leave Egypt, the sea splits. And we have a song that discusses, the mountains moving in order for the Jewish people to have a flat land to walk through, and the sea splitting. We have a song that we say on Hanukkah also, every day of the 8 days of Hanukkah. We say, B'tzeit Yisrael Mitzrayim, when the Jews left out of Egypt. And the Jewish people are walking, and the sea runs away, the sea splits for us. And we turn over to the ocean, in quotation, in Psalms speaking, in such a way. We turn over Malacha Hayam Kitanus. Oh ocean, why are you running away? And the response is basically, well, look at who's showing up. It's the Jewish people. heading for Mount Sinai. When the Jewish people are heading for Mount Sinai, nature bends to us, and that's just norm. That's not a miracle. The sea splitting, oh, that's norm. You don't believe me? Open the text. Book of Exodus. The Jewish people leave out of Egypt. We were facing the Red Sea, the Sea of Reeds. And the Jewish people panic because they see Pharaoh coming behind them, desert on the right, desert on the left, and an ocean in front of them. And Moses turns over to God and says, God Almighty, what do we do? What does God say? Just go. God doesn't even give him direction. You know those Israelis, you're like, Yashar, Yashar? God doesn't even give him the Yashar, Yashar. Just go. Which way? It doesn't matter. It's the Jews heading for Mount Sinai. Wherever you'll go, there's going to be something's going to work out. It's nature. It's not supernatural. That is the way that God designed this world. The true norm of this world is for the Jewish people to walk to Mount Sinai. That's the design. In which case, oh, there's water, don't worry, it's going to move. There's a mountain, don't worry, we'll flatten it out. It's all part of the nature. That's part of what this creation was supposed to obtain. That's how it's supposed to be. So when the Jewish people step up and they say, you know what, Greek culture is taking over. And don't take it as if you're like, well, it was creeping a little bit. 80% of the Jewish people living in Israel at this time became, like converts or whatever the definition might be, joined the Greek culture. By the masses, 80%. They were building altars in Jewish communities and sacrificing pigs for the Greek gods, publicly. That's really how the whole warfare started. Someone stepped up and he said, no, this can't happen, and took action. It's an amazing, amazing thing. But an interesting observation is that all of these miracles that take place in this fashion, in this format, only take place in the second temple. In the first temple, we have much greater miracles, but they're autopilot miracles. We have the ark. We have this breastplate that the Kohen Gadol is wearing. Inside there's a fold. There's the name of God folded into it. We want to go to war. We ask a question. Letters on the breastplate would light up and give us an answer. Yes, no, how, what, when. And then from that point, everything took place on its own. It was autopilot. During the second temple, it was a whole different era. We don't have the Holy Ark. We don't have the breastplate. There's a lot of the day-to-day miracles that have gone down. But if you look at it, how do we get to a second temple? We have to beg for first temple, which is go into the land of Israel and build a temple. Second temple, we have to beg permission from the Babylonian king, from the Persian king, grandchild of Esther, the story of Purim. But we get somehow permission, we make our way back to Israel. That's second temple. Constantly wars, constantly fighting battles. We had to fight to hold on to that second temple. The first one, once we're there, everything was going. Second temple, it was a constant battle. It was a constant test. How much do you want it? And when Greek culture creeped in, well, some Jews slipped off, and eventually some stood up and they said, no, we're fighting for this. We fought for this temple. We'll fight for it again. And when Jews are willing to fight for what is right, miracles will take place every single day. So let's talk about Hanukkah in our days now. All those miracles took place 2,000 years ago. What about us? Are we simply commemorating and eating donuts because they used oil, so we use oil to deep fry our foods? Like, is that really what it's all about? And yes, there is an importance to it. But is that it? So here's the idea. There is a law that says, every day we're supposed to say Al HaNisim. We're supposed to say in the prayers, morning, afternoon, evening, and in our after we eat a meal, we say a blessing. In that blessing, we add a paragraph it's called Al HaNisim. We say thanks for the miracles that took place on Hanukkah. What if you forget? What do you do? So the rabbi said, well, there is another way to do it. And that is, in the prayers and the services, we say, we thank God for the miracles that happened then. But if you forget, you add a new paragraph that the wording goes the following. May the merciful be, blessed his name, make miracles for us today as he did for our forefathers. Since when do we ask for miracles? All throughout the ages. You look at all of our prayers. We ask that things should work out. We ask for like that whatever God sees as the good thing should take place. We never ask for outright miracles. That's not the form of prayer. So why is it that Halakha tells us that on Hanukkah, the one time of the year, that we do specifically ask for miracles? The answer is the following. Our Hanukkah today is exactly the same battle that they fought their Hanukkah 2,300 years ago. Today, once again, we have a challenge of Greek culture in our midst. It's the norm. It's the good thing. It's the easy life. It's the normal life. It's the democratic life. It's the Canadian thing. It's the American thing. It's the Western world thing to do. And there's two parts to it. There is the part which is education, knowledge, goodness. All those things are great. But then it reaches a point where it's me, me, me. How am I going to achieve for myself? How am I going to accomplish for my very own self? And that, my friends, is a battle. That's the battle of Greek culture and Judaism colliding in 2013. And for that, as then, Jews have to unite and stand for what is right. And if we do that, we can see miracles again. What do I mean? Do you know that 1 out of every 8, I kid you not, this was tested in the United States of America, 1 of every 8 university students who's Jewish identifies himself as Jewish publicly? Some of them will go onto the Hillel list, and some of them will attend a party, but publicly to admit that they're Jewish, 1 out of 8, we're losing our numbers all the time. You think about it. In 50 years, if Blaise Pascal comes around, he shouldn't be shocked if we're not around. We're doing it to ourselves. We're stepping away. And we can't blame anyone else. We have the text. We know what's right. And it's Hanukkah. This is the time of year. This is the time that we can expect the miracles. And believe me, coming here today is your part in making that miracle take place. You being here today for Blaise Pascal is a miracle. He used you, every single one of us. He used us as the proof for the supernatural. And we're going to see these miracles continue if we just unite and do what is right. Thank you very, very much, everyone, for coming.
Thank you, Rabbi Greiniman. Would you take some questions?
Sure.
Anybody?
Rabbi,
Yes.
you said that they fought for the Torah.
Correct.
Unfortunately, today, well, in Israel,
Yeah.
they fought for survival. In the two major wars in 1967 and 1973,
Correct.
one was for the Torah.
I would beg to differ. I would beg to disagree. I'll explain to you why I disagree with that. I'll tell you why I disagree with that. In 1967 and in 1973, we could have left. We could have left.
Want to protect their land.
You're now arguing about a piece of land. You're saying it's for survival of life and death. I know a lot of Israelis who left Israel, and it's like, there you go. They were fighting for Torah. They're fighting for the piece of land because of our connection to it. The person who does not believe at all, zero, in Judaism, doesn't fight to the death for a piece of land that means nothing to him. And in 1967, we didn't have a long history in Israel. We were there only since 1948. If you're taking Judaism away from it, it's been your home for 15, 20 years, leave! There's too much more! No, we don't leave. It's not because it's home. Remember, someone did suggest that we should go to Uganda. We said no. Israel is part of Torah, without question. It's part of our connection. That's who we are.
But those Israelis today are secular.
Even the secular Israeli, stop him and ask him to desecrate a Magen David Adom, he wouldn't do it. Ask him to take a Sefer Torah and throw it out, he wouldn't do it. Deep inside, he has a connection. He might not be the practicing Jew as we would, like as we are, or as we would like him to become, and he might not, do everything. The strong connection between the Jew and the Jew, like Jews who are living in Israel, almost over more so, are connected. They could live everywhere else. You and I know a lot of Jews who left Israel and found a very good, comfortable life elsewhere, and never looked back. People who want to leave do. Those who fight for it, those who stay there, are people who have a deep connection to the land. It's not all, you don't stay in Israel only because they're good at high tech. Like, people who go, for a mother to send her kids to school in Israel, it's far more stressful than it is to do here in Ottawa. For a mother to have, here in America, when a kid grows up and becomes a teenager, it's such a pain in the tuchus, but it's such a celebration to see them grow up. In Israel, I speak to mothers like that. My child is 16, I can't sleep at night. Like, why? Because next year he's 17 and there's going to be a letter in the mail. He's going away for 3 years. And it's a dangerous place. She never thought about now sending him to an army. That's not even a question. Fighting for Israel is, the fight is a fight for survival. I agree. But it's a fight for Torah. Any other questions?
How do you square with the fact that there's so many Israelis living abroad? I mean, I heard some ridiculous figure like 800,000 Israelis not living in Israel. Is that a correct figure?
Correct or not, I can't. That I don't know. That I have no idea.
But the reverse goes.
But yeah, I was going to say, but look at it. We just crossed. There is now in Israel, there's over 7 million citizens, and very recently, just a few months ago, we crossed the 6 million Jews in Israel marker. It is the greatest, no questions asked, greatest concentration of Jews in the world. There's millions of Jews who immigrated to Israel. Is it difficult to live there? No question. I grew up there. I lived there. I used to work for Magen David Adom. Believe me, it's not an easy place to raise children. It has its challenges. I'm not saying that those who leave are right. And I left. Believe me, I cry every single time when I leave. I cry every single time when I go back. And I several times a year cry myself to bed that I'm not living there now. Several times. Ask anyone who knows me. If I could move, if I could find a job that would sustain my family in Israel, I would move in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat. To the point that for the last 9 years, I've been living in Canada. Every single year when I go to visit Israel, I beg my teacher, my rabbi, to allow me, literally, to allow me to come back. And he every year tells me, no. Jewry Worldwide still needs you out there. You're not allowed back in Israel. Those are his words.
I give you a real example myself. When I went back to Israel, I was working for an Israeli company, and then whatever the rate of people, I left Israel the last time in 1995 because of Parnasah. I got a job for an American company, Lockheed Martin. So many Israelis leaving because of parnasa, you know.
Correct. But I was I'm like, there's the draw, I'm like, come on. Millions of people left their belongings behind and made their way to Israel. I don't know what exactly is the number from Russia. Does anyone know? Anyone knows what's the number of Russians who moved to Israel?
Over a million.
Over a million?
Like
Over a million.
15% now.
What's that?
Like 15% the Russian speaking.
15% are Russian speaking. Those people had to leave belongings. They had to leave their families. They had to leave their citizenship. In many cases, they were happy to do so, but they had to literally give up their citizenship and run away. For what? To go to a country that they're being chased? Yes! We love being in this peaceful land where unfortunately we're being chased. We're not happy about that part, but we're very happy being there.
And ironically,
Yeah.
in Russia, they're known as Yidden. And in Israel, they're known as Russian.
That is kind of correct. I actually, like in their, I'm not sure if it's a passport, but in the Russian ID card or in Russian passport, the nationality is referred to as Yid. Unbelievable. 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 I was introduced to that by my good friend Benji Gorodnitsky in the Torah He said, Rabbi, you should just know, in Russia, I was referred to as a Zhed. What? I'm like officially on this ID card. Unbelievable. Well, thank you very much.